Hey Bible lovers, I'm Tim Nichols, and I'm here to bring you a different type of Nichols Worth today. We're going to be talking about why the NKJV is my favorite translation, and I'm going to be giving you 7 reasons. So let's go ahead and start off with reason number 1, and that is textual source. I absolutely love that we have a modern translation in the Textus Receptus. Now, I'm not here to argue whether or not the Textus Receptus is the best manuscript or whether the critical apparatus is the best manuscript, but here's what I know. I know there are a lot of scholars that I trust and I know are well-studied men and women of God that believe that the Textus Receptus contains the full counsel of God's Word. And they show some pretty strong evidence that some of these textual variants that some people consider so problematic are, number 1, not problematic at all, and number 2, actually show pretty strong evidence for inclusion in the body of the text itself. And one of the more popular textual variants is the ending of Mark. Is it the long ending or the short ending? And there seems to be very strong evidence that the long ending of Mark is original. And I really appreciate that's in the body of the text. Number 2 is I really appreciate the fact that it's faithful to the cadence and the beauty of the King James Version of the Bible. The King James Version of the Bible is among the best-selling Bibles in the world for a reason, because it captures the majesty and beauty of God's Word, and that is not lost with the New King James. This especially shines in the poetry, where that poetic form is carried over into the New King James, and that beauty and cadence that you expect in poetry that just isn't found in some of your more dynamic translations or some of your more modern translations, and I really appreciate the commitment to that. The only other English translation in my mind that can compare to the beauty of the King James is the ESV. Because of their frequent commitment to textual updates, I find that one difficult to commit to. The third reason the NKJV is my favorite translation is because the archaic words have been modernized. Yes, there are times that the NKJV uses words that aren't part of daily modern vernacular. For example, the word firmament. But any of the words they use today are actually still in use today and easy to find the definition to with a simple dictionary. You don't have to go digging around looking for an old dictionary trying to figure out what archaic words mean. It really just requires a moderate level of reading skill. One of the biggest examples of this is the these, the thous, the ye's, and the cometh, and words like that have been replaced with a more modern equivalent so that we can read it a little more smoothly. But with the New King James, we no longer have to struggle with archaic words like concupiscence, which I didn't even know what it meant until I had to dig around and figure it out. But in the New King James, it translates it desires. There are several examples like that in the New King James where a word that's no longer in use, and even someone with a high degree of education or a high reading level wouldn't understand it because the word's no longer used. And also, sometimes words change meaning over time. For example, the word closet, when Jesus said in Matthew 6:6, go in your closet to pray. In modern English, we imagine going inside a closet, a storage room, or a place where you hang your clothing. That's not what Jesus meant. That's what it meant several hundred years ago when the King James was translated, but now that word is better translated room. 400 years ago, the word closet meant a small private room. So now the NKJV properly translates that word room. Go into your room and pray. Jesus' point there wasn't to go hide inside of a closet to pray. He was saying go somewhere private. And I think that room more accurately portrays the intent of what Jesus was saying there. The number 4 reason that the NKJV is my favorite translation is because you get the benefit of the majority text and the critical text in the textual footnotes. And I think that is massively important. Not only do you have 3 of the major manuscripts available right there in one translation, but you also have scholarly integrity to where they're saying, this is where this textual source words this a little bit differently, or this is where this textual source has a little bit of disagreement here, or this is where this textual source has a variant. One thing we need to realize is when you read a translation, the textual footnotes are the second most important part of the translation other than the translation of the text itself. You need to make sure you utilize those textual footnotes because that's a big deal in letting you understand, number 1, the thoughts of the translators, what a more literal rendering might be today, even though possibly we wouldn't understand it. Also gives us access to these other textual sources and lets us know where there may be some variants or where things may have been rendered a little bit differently, so we get full scholarly integrity, which leads to my 5th reason, which is the supplied words are in italics. And I think that is critically important because they chose to use a complete equivalence translation strategy, which is basically you take the original word in the Hebrew, the Aramaic, or the Greek, and they find the closest equivalent to that word in English today in modern language. So think about this, 130 scholars. This is the largest translation committee in English-speaking history. All looked at these words individually and worked together to find the closest English equivalent. But in order to make the phrases make sense, they would add like a is or a the, or sometimes a couple of words here and there in order to make the sentence make sense in English and keep that complete equivalence, and they italicize those. That is a level of scholarly integrity that I think is important. The only other modern translation I'm aware of that does this is the NASB, and I think that's probably largely because of their translation strategy to keep the English as word for word to the original languages as possible. There's no such thing as an exact word for word text from ancient languages into English. That's not a possibility. Even modern languages today, when you translate from one to the other, you can't go word for word because it doesn't always make sense in the receptor language. So we have to interpret a little bit, and they do as little of that as possible. And when they do it, they use supplied words and they're italicized, so you know what you're reading, and I think that's critically important. The number 6 reason the NKJV is my favorite translation, and you all know exactly how I feel about this, that is no textual updates. I believe that textual updates every 5 to 10 years are completely overdone, completely unnecessary. I do not believe that English language changes so much that after 5 to 10 years, we have to update the text. In another video, which I'll put at the end screen of this video, I talk about the fact that that can actually be handled flawlessly in the textual footnotes. And that's one thing I do hope that the NKJV committee does get together and do, is eventually go ahead and update those footnotes, but just leave the text itself alone. I could be definitely down for that. And the 7th reason, this one's probably the least important, is that there are a myriad of study tools available in the New King James. Number 1, you have Bibles with a full suite of references and full suite of footnotes. The NKJV Sovereign is a good example of that, but you also have the NKJV Study Bible. You have the NKJV Spirit-Filled Life Bible. You have the Evangelical Study Bible. You have the Thompson Chain Reference Bible. You have the Cultural Backgrounds Study Bible. So the NKJV offers you this wide array of study tools in that translation, so you can have your favorite translation available with the study tools that you know and love. So there's 7 reasons why the NKJV is my favorite translation. God bless you. Keep calm and Jesus on.